And I am very pleased to introduce our panel for the conversation today. And we'll start out by just giving each of the panelists a brief opportunity to introduce themselves, their current position, and provide us with a very quick 30 to 45-second run through of their career journeys from college to today and the roles that they've held in between. So I will go ahead and start with Andrea. You can kick us off.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Educate Maine, for this opportunity to meet the panelists. I grew up in central Maine. I went to the University of New Hampshire to college and came back to Maine Law School immediately after college. I had a bit of a political background with my father involved in state politics and my own personal interest in the Democratic Party. With my law degree, I became an advocate for companies at the legislature, also known as lobbyist. And I like to think I'm on the good side of the lobbyists. I know some have bad names, but I spent my whole career in one way or another involved in public policy and social change. So I started out at a major law firm in Portland. I had clients, I represented them in Augusta. My largest client then offered me a full-time job. I went in and worked for them for 10 years, which gave me some great in-depth experience. It was a company, it was a paper company. They got sold, and so I was without a job. So I spent a little bit of time at home with my 4 children, but decided to get back out in the world. So I just sent out letters and found a few new clients and started my own practice in order to get back into my profession. Once again, one of my major clients hired me, and I went into Martins Point Healthcare for 6 years. But I was really missing that work didn't get me too involved in Augusta or at the Maine level. And at that point, my kids were older. I had more time. So I went back to private practice at the law firm I had been in originally, and again represented clients. And it was then when I also started as sort of civic engagement, Focus Maine, which is the organization that partners with Educate Maine to put on the Maine Career Catalyst. And we also are working to grow Maine's food economy and Maine's life science economy. I retired from my law practice when I hit that ripe age of retirement. And a year and a half later, Focus Maine needed a president. So I stepped in and I now work full time as Focus Maine's president.
Thank you, Andrea. Seth, I'll have you go next.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Seth Goodall. I'm the Executive Director of the University of Maine Systems Graduate Professional Center located in the Old Port of Portland, Maine. I also serve as CEO of Maine Center Ventures. My journey has had some changes and different pivots along the way. I went to college and actually received an undergraduate degree in turf grass science, agronomy, as well as soil science, a master's degree, thinking I was going to go into either golf course or sports field management. But ultimately, I went on to law school and practiced law, and I got a bit of the political bug. And you heard Andrea speak a little bit about her background. I was on the other side. I was an elected official and really enjoyed working with Andrea, truth be told. So she was doing great things there. Served in the Maine State Senate for 5 years, was appointed by President Obama to lead the U.S. Small Business Administration across New England. And then I became a banker. Never thought I was going to be a banker. I went to Santander Bank, a global bank, this U.S. division headquartered out of Boston, led their SBA lending program there, government guaranteed lending, grew that, moved into the corporate social responsibility and sustainability space, oversaw that. And just over a year and a half ago, I came to University of Maine System to help develop and lead the Maine Center. And it's just been a phenomenal journey and really kind of an interdisciplinary approach, and has really strengthened, I think, the ability for me to do different things as a result of all those experiences. So it's great to be here with you.
Thanks, Seth. Matt?
Morning, all. Matt Rothman from Hannaford Supermarkets. I started going to school as an environmental engineer and realized really quickly that was not the path for me. So I came home to Maine. I went to USM. I did not study law, but I did have a heavy concentration in political science and business. When I came out, I was thinking I was going to possibly stay working in marketing. I was working for a couple different companies, Red Bull, and then an experiential marketing company. Then I was thinking insurance. really didn't know where I was going to go. And then I got an email about a management training program at Hannaford, and that kind of kicked off my 18-year journey with the company. So I spent the first 5 years in retail, learning the business, and then leading stores across Southern Maine. I had an opportunity to pivot, come inside our corporate office, and lead our retail communications team, which I didn't really know much about communications tools or technology because I had been a retail operator. So that was a really interesting opportunity to learn a different skill set inside of the business. From there, I dabbled a little bit into retail technology because I kind of caught that bug of trying to find efficiencies. That pivoted me into a business consultant role for about a year where I was trying to find smarter, better ways to deploy and roll things out in our stores. And then a complete curveball came about 7 years ago, and it was like, "Hey, would you wanna come into the HR space and try to lead and develop, our next generation of future retail leaders?" And at first, I balked at the idea because I was solely bought into technology efficiencies and trying to make it better for everybody. And then I realized, wow, I could still use technology and efficiencies, but I could try to make it better for everybody from a people-centered approach. And that's when I kind of really realized what gave me purpose, which was people development. And so I've been in this HR space now for, like I said, about 7 years. Just recently took on a new overarching role, leading all of our recruiting efforts across the 5 states, 189 stores that we operate in, as well as our corporate office. So it really gives me an opportunity now to lift my head up and operate more strategically across our footprint and really try to make some good strategic bets about where we can invest and how we can grow our business. So a little bit about me. Thank you.
Thank you. Julia, bring us home.
Thank you, everybody. So Julia Trujillo, a little bit of a different background, but I also see similarities across the panelists. So I was born and raised in the Canary Islands, which is about 80 kilometers off the coast of West Africa. The Canary Islands are part of Spain and the European Union, but I grew up in a place that there's 7 islands. The island I grew up, it's called often referred to as a miniature continent. So I grew up thinking that I would be working for the UN and doing international development. So that was my trajectory from 8 years old on. Life took me to Maine when I was about 16 years old to improve my English. And then I went back to Spain and I actually attempted to get my law degree because I wanted to work in international development. But in Spain, it would take 17 years to. You had to go through diplomatic school and so on. So I said I could just go back to Maine, get my undergrad in international studies. And so that's what I did. And the rest is history. So I got my undergraduate degree here and my master's degree back in Europe. And then I came back to Spain, to the United States because of the recession of 2008. And like many international trained professionals, I could not find a job in my field. I applied for 50, 60 jobs at the time. So I was working at a printing company in Lewiston for 2 or 3 years until the Maine Department of Education gave me my first chance, and I worked at the migrant education program supporting migrant families all over the state. Since then, I've worked for 3 different agencies, the HHS, DOE, and DECD, always in public policy, always in the public sector. I've also worked at the city of Portland. I created the first office of its kind in Maine, dedicated to the unique needs of Maine's racial, ethnic, and linguistic minorities. And now I'm at the Maine Community College System after spending 3 years at DECD running the economic development plan for the administration. So now I oversee strategic partnerships for the Maine Community College System. And I live in Portland, and I intend to stay in Maine as long as I can.
We're glad you're here. Thank you. Well, hopefully those brief introductions gave you a great sense that these panelists have had very interesting and varied career journeys, whether staying in one or two companies and really growing and changing and exploring what roles exist within a particular industry, or going in between different industries and using their degree, not using their degree, trying to figure out what life is like. And so the big overarching message, if you take anything away from today, is that life is not linear, career paths are not linear, and there's a lot of lessons learned from that. So we'll go ahead and dive right into the conversation. If you have any questions that come up throughout the course of the panel discussion, please feel free to put them in the Q&A feature. We're hoping to leave plenty of time at the end for audience Q&A. But I will go ahead and kick things off and start with Matt. You held a wide variety of different roles during your Hannaford career, as you mentioned, from retail management to communications and tech to business consulting and most recently talent management and recruiting. How did you find yourself in each role, and how did you know that it was the right opportunity to move into the next role, and how did each step along your ladder help you prepare for what was coming next?
Great question, Hannah. And what I will say is you can refer to it as a ladder, but there were definitely some lattice moves across that, which helped me get kind of higher up, if you will. And so when I started in retail, I learned really quickly that I love to be involved. I love to be needed. I'm that classic millennial. Give me a pat on the back, but also ask me how I can support you. And so running a retail store with a few hundred associates and thousands of customers, a lot of people needed you for things. And that was really filling my cup. I loved being busy. I loved the interaction. The side I wasn't the biggest fan of was the nights, the weekends. And so part of it for me was I was at a point in my life where I was thinking about trying to make a personal life shift because I wanted to start a family. And so it was, I want to continue to grow with this company because I believe in this company, but what's going to be right for me personally? And that's one of those reflections that it takes some maturity to like not just think of where's the next paycheck and what's the next thing that's going to get me there, but what's also going to keep me whole and healthy mentally and feeling good. And so at that point, I realized I need to find something that will give me kind of that structure that I was looking for. And that's when I took advice that I didn't take the first 3, 4 years of my career. And I leaned into my network and my mentors and my sponsors and people that I've worked with over the years that gave me some insight and said, hey, there's a lot of really interesting careers and job paths that you can go for within this organization. And if I was coming off the street, they might say, I don't know if you have the skill sets because they wouldn't have seen any demonstrated leadership from me. But what I was told was, you can lead people, you can motivate a team, you can get them to rally behind you. That is something that not everyone can have and can do, and it's hard to teach, but you can teach technical. So I was given the feedback of, don't let the requirements of the role or the scope of the role intimidate you if what you're doing is joining a team to lead them, right? You can learn what they're doing and you can learn how to lead them better and more efficiently if you're a good leader. And so I kind of like reflected on that. And so when I had the opportunity for this retail communications role, I was like, I don't know communications. I don't know technology. Granted, this was 15 years ago. Technology is different than it was, but still. And they told me, you don't need to know any of it. You just need to know people. So I went for it. I got it and I came in and I really thought so when I originally said I was going to school for engineering, I have a kind of engineering mapping out mindset, right? Trying to solve a puzzle and everything has an action reaction. When I got into that role, there was so much application maintenance and ways that we can make it easier and better by leveraging technology. It activated that bit of an engineering mindset for me. And so I realized, wow, I can learn the technical, but I brought that people management that came from retail. So it's like I had that and then I learned the technical. And then I got to a point where my team was firing on all cylinders. I was eager and I was hungry to grow and learn more. So I raised my hand and said, hey, I want to be a champion. We have an opportunity to try to pilot this technology to look at areas of our store and use technology to tell us what to do next and what items to fill. And so that just kind of sparked a, well, let's get after it. And so one thing I will say, when you get into a company and when you have an opportunity to raise your hand and have a voice and a seat at the table, do so because you never know what opportunities may come from it, right? I did that. And then when I had lifted my head up and started thinking cross functionally, how might we bring a robot to life in our stores that could then inform us of how to make better business decisions? That was right around the time we were realizing we had an opportunity to create a new part of the organization that would gatekeep the processes and the workflow to ensure that it's profitable, it's the right thing for the business, and it's easy to execute at retail. All of those things were kind of skill sets and pieces that I added to my tool belt coming along my career journey. And so from there, it was a great pivot and opportunity to go into this kind of business consultant role, which was totally a step back because I like to be involved and I also like to have a say in things. At this point, I really was just ingesting all of this information and then trying to give, hey, here's how I would approach it, here's how you could do it. So it was very much, I don't have the ownership, but if I was you, this is how I would bring this to life. That got me additional cross-functional exposure with a variety of other leaders that saw me leading at a different level in a much more bigger picture strategic thought process of, wow, there was no process, we're now creating a process. Maybe Matt has some more process abilities here. Maybe if we put him in another area of the organization that we have an opportunity to grow a process, he could put that same energy there. And so that's what ultimately happened from an HR perspective was a, hey, we have a void in the organization around early career pathing and mapping. We'd like to create a position and we think you'd be great for it. How do you feel about it? I was like, yeah, I don't know if that's for me. I'm really excited about technology. And then I saw kind of like a vision of a roadmap and some ideation of how they had thought about bringing this role to life. And it just sucked me right in because it was leveraging my time at retail, my managing of people, my technology, my looking at processes from a consultative perspective and trying to find better, more efficient ways. And it was like it was checking all of those boxes. And then I got into it, and then it checked another box I didn't even realize, which was just helping people grow and develop. And so through that career journey, I've had different little things that have sparked parts in my brain to say this is something that I enjoy and something that I'm good at. And that's helped by staying at the same company, other people see the value in me in there, which has kind of helped shape that path. And all along, it wasn't always, hey, you want the job, it's yours. I had to work for it. But it was me having that growth mindset, being hungry and trying to show what I could do that got me there.
Great. Yeah. I know a lot of the conversation nowadays is how can people job hop or transition, and there's certainly benefits to that. But as you've highlighted, there are certainly assets to choosing to stay and work with the same company for an extended period of time. And want to give an opportunity. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to speak on that or not.
So I mentioned I spent 10 years at a paper company. It was Champion International in Bucksport, Maine. It's no longer there. But I was there for 10 years in-house with them. I was a consultant for them for 2 years prior to that. And I think you heard it in what Matt was saying, but as you know, early in your career, you do a lot of tactical work, you're hired to do projects, initiatives, or whatnot. But as you stay in an organization, you start to gain historical knowledge about the organization. You also develop relationships with the people within the organization, so you know how to work together, work well together. And those two things, as well as understanding the values and the operational norms of the organization, you stay there long enough and it just starts to become second nature. And you then can start to think strategically about what could be the next move be. And you've heard, I think Matt just gave some perfect examples of that. He saw opportunities, and he did that because he mastered his skill that he was hired to do for the company. He created relationships, and then he could look more broadly at the organization and what the next opportunity could be. So I do think that while people do, and I did change careers over and over again, a length of time at an organization, and same happened for me at Martin's Point, but it just gives you that opportunity to advance and develop your strategic skills based on what you've learned within the duration of being in an organization.
Thank you for elaborating. I am going to turn it over to Seth and Julia. Both of you made mid-career transitions into the world of post-secondary education. What prompted you to make that transition? And do you have any examples of how you've utilized your previous experience to assist you in your current roles, both with the University of Maine system and the Maine Community of College system?
Would you like to go first?
It's fine. You can go first, Seth.
So for me, I've lived in Maine my whole life, and I was based out of Boston doing plane, trains, and automobiles, to be candid. And we have a beautiful 14-year-old daughter, and I was really thinking about what was next for me. And I knew I also was potentially needing to make a decision on which way I want to pivot within the company or to another company, especially within financial services. Those of you that get into financial services, there's a lot of mobility. People move around a lot. It's just the nature of the industry, and that's good and bad at times. But so I was looking for the right opportunity, and I knew I wanted to be grounded in Maine for both professional as well as personal reasons, including impact. And so looking at different opportunities, this one actually came to me. I wasn't seeking out a specific role. I learned about it and I did my due diligence. And that was really exciting for me. And of course, working for a public institution, there's a long process, which is very important to get the right candidate, no matter what the role is. And the more I learned about the role, the more I learned that I could build something. I could work with stakeholders and really have a greater impact on the state of Maine based on the size and scope. And that was almost like a startup company in a lot of ways, because that's what we're doing here. So that got me excited. And then one thing I'll say is that no matter if you are transitioning for a career change or going to another role, even within your existing company, make sure you get to know and understand the culture. Make sure you get to understand the people that you're working with and the goals and objectives, because you will change, you will evolve, your priorities will change. And you probably heard a little bit of that through my story here, thinking about where our daughter is, thinking about, some of the impact I wanted to have, not that I wasn't having impact. And that's why it's really important you make the decision and what's best for you. And the last thing I'll say is that a friend and mentor of mine just 3-4 years ago looked at me one day and said, Seth, you need to start investing more in Seth. And I said, well, that was interesting. What do you mean by that? He's like, start exploring, seeing what's best for you, not necessarily inside this company, but outside the company too, because one, you may realize how good you have it in the company, or two, you may realize that there's another opportunity out there that you want to pursue. So always be investing in yourself, and I think you'll find that right opportunity.
And I'll add, I think for me, I spoke about my first role in public service at the Maine Department of Education, running the migrant education program and overseeing federal programs. And at the time, I don't want to say I disregarded my own connection to the work, which was that I had the opportunity to work with families directly. I ran a blueberry harvest school for the blueberry harvest in down East Maine. So I had that contact with my impact, but at the same time, I was running a statewide program and federal program. So I had the entire journey of that impact. And I think in my career, as I grew in my career, I was overseeing a wider scope, but always from a state level perspective, of a citywide perspective, that I missed that contact with my ultimate daily work. So I saw as an opportunity when I went to the Maine community college system to do both, to be at that strategic level and oversee the vision of the system as a whole and support our colleges, but also have that direct contact with our students, direct contact with our employees. And it's something that I miss. So I think a lesson that I learned is that just do not forget sort of that spark and that passion that is within you, and kind of what Seth, don't forget about Seth, don't forget that connection to that work, because I really believe in sort of that instinct, that and that gut. So don't forget that when you are in your journey.
Yeah, thank you both for highlighting the importance of figuring out what you're interested in and identifying, is it on the groundwork? Is it larger scale strategic work? Is it some sort of combination of both that really fuels your fire? So appreciate those takeaways. Andrea, you have a really interesting perspective. You've been involved with Focus Maine since its inception as the organization's co-founder and co-chair, while simultaneously working, your full-time career with Pierce Atwood. How did your involvement with Focus Maine as co-founder and co-chair build upon your full-time career, and what's it been like to now assume the role as president, however, so over a decade later? Oh, I think you're muted.
Thanks. Um, I feel so blessed to have this be maybe probably a kind of a final chapter for me in my career. So yeah, I was at Pierce Atwood. My whole career has been around the spark in me, I guess you'd say, is to try to create and maintain good jobs in Maine for Maine people. Because a good job just means a healthier life and lifestyle for all Mainers. And so even in the lobbying work that I did, it was around really with that as the intention of the kind of clients I took and the kind of projects I worked on. And here we were, it was about 11 years ago when we had lost all these paper mill jobs. I was one of them, but I was able to regroup and find myself more employment in Maine. A lot of paper workers had to leave the state because they didn't find the jobs here. And it was heartbreaking to me. So I decided in my spare time, I was a full-time practicing attorney, but in my spare time, I wanted to start this organization to help transform Maine's economy. And got a co-chair, Mike Dubiak, who at the time was the chairman of WEX, to say he wanted to do it with me. And we started this 11 years ago, designed to help transform the economy. And it has filled my heart to do that work. It was nights and weekends in order to do it because I was working full time. And then I retired from my full-time job and had a year and a half where I could do it during the week a little bit. But then the presidency opened up and I stepped into it after about a year and a half of being retired. I want to say I started it because in my heart, I wanted to help Maine and Maine families and replace those paper mill jobs. And I used what I knew in terms of I developed an organization when I worked for Champion that was called the Maine Coalition for Excellence in Education. It was part of my job to do that work to help transform or reform education in Maine. That organization is now Educate Maine, that was the K-12 part of it, and Educate Maine became that coalition plus the Compact for Higher Education. So I've been working on a social change initiative for a number of years to get what's now Educate Maine up and going. Through my lobbying, I learned how to do coalition building, how to put together strategic plans and work with a whole group of people to get them to all move forward their pieces of it, which is really how Focus Maine does its work. Again, focus around economic development and creating jobs and just building on the skill set that I had from my profession to create this initiative that is in fact growing Maine's food economy, is inspiring Maine's life science economy. And we have over 500 interns enrolled in Maine Career Catalyst this year, and we did last year. So we're thrilled about that and getting more talented people, young college people who will become professionals interested in perhaps pursuing careers here in Maine.
Thank you all. Really appreciate you sharing a bit more of your stories. I'm going to transition into some open-ended questions that I encourage any of our panelists to respond to. Starting with, can you tell us about a specific time when you made a career pivot and specifically sort of how you knew you were ready for a career pivot and what gave you the confidence to make that move, transitioning out of a role that maybe you had become comfortable in? Anyone can go ahead and kick us
So
off.
I'll keep the mic and then I'll turn it over. I was at Martins Point Healthcare for 6 years. I was working in healthcare for that company, and the role there was more and more internal communications for me. I was less and less in Augusta and feeling more and more disconnected from the state of Maine and the state economy. And I was supporting a CEO whose daily passion was about healthcare. And I was so envious of him. He would wake up every morning excited to do his work to transform the experience of healthcare. And I finally decided, okay, Andrea, you're at this age and stage in your life where if you're going to do something for your passion, you've got to make the move to make it happen. And so at that point, I went back to Pierce Atwood. I'd started my career at Pierce Atwood and I left. I left because my now husband was working there and we didn't want to be married and work at the same place. So personal choice. But he had since left Pierce Atwood, and I went to them and asked if they knew of something I might do. And they said, we'd love to have you come back and work in our government relations practice. So that was a very conscious decision on my part to make a move and get back onto my statewide platform with my clients. And then, as you heard, my time opened up when my 3 children are off. I just had my 4th one at home on automatic pilot. And I said, I have time. I'm going to lean into doing something for Maine, which we now know of as Focus Maine.
I guess I can jump in really quickly here. So when I was running our retail communications team, I was in that role for about 4 years. Took about a year to feel up to snuff, and by year 3, it was kind of running itself, and I was just there making sure people were doing what they needed to do. That's what gave me the time to then pivot and look at the retail technology space, and I was playing with that with the robots. And mind you, at this point, I'd been with the company almost 10 years. I'd always had direct reports or multiple direct reports up until that point. And then there was the, hey, we're creating this new area. It's a business consultant role. You're no longer going to be supervising people. You're going to go into an individual contributor role. You're not going to lose any pay, but it is totally a lateral move. But it's to give you exposure, not only for me to learn about other areas of the business, but for other people to see me operating in a different way and at a different level. And at first, I was like, I'm losing being a leader. And that's something that I really took to. But I understood that organizationally, it was the right exposure for me. And it was an opportunity for me to say, okay. And I was like consciously made peace with no longer having direct reports. And I went and I took that role. And it was a great opportunity to see a different side of the business. I'll tell you this, though, I'm really happy now that I have a team again. It took me 7 years of not having direct reports and just kind of being a team of one and leveraging the other resources. Um, and then it took, obviously, it wasn't a lateral move to the recruiting role, but then ultimately coming back over here. But that's definitely one where I really had to kind of gut check myself and humble myself a little bit, that if I want to do more in this organization and be seen differently, I need to go somewhere where I maybe am not the manager.
Thank you. Anyone else like to add on to that?
Sure. One thing, in terms of preparing for a career impact, I think we're at a unprecedented point in volatility in the workplace in the next handful of years as a result of AI. I'll just say I'm a believer. I think that it's going to turn things upside down, especially in certain industries, more than people even can grasp right now. And it could come fast, especially in areas that are outside highly regulated areas. That being said, I would always be prepared to let the opportunities find you. Too often, you see people searching for opportunities rather than doing their job extremely well, being a leader, just excelling at what they do and taking advantage of opportunities to lead projects and have strong communications and relationships. That being said, I think we really need to prepare one another and ourselves to pivot by necessity in the near future. My job that I left a year and a half ago will entirely change, and it's changing rapidly, and it may actually go away. And as a result, a new job will come for that. So I'm taking a little bit of a spin on that and encouraging people to pivot, because I think it's going to be necessary to be AI minded first, and how do you apply those tools? And then those that are ahead of the game will have immense opportunities, whether you're just starting out or whether you're in the second half of your career.
I'll just tell a short little story on a pivot and finding opportunity in the least expected place. So I was working for the Department of Health and Human Services, and the city of Portland had several grants with us, and they were in a corrective action plan that was not moving forward as fast as expected. So I had to request a meeting with the city manager at the time, John Jennings. Um, and the relationship between the city of Portland and the Department of Health and Human Services under Governor LePage was not great. And I went into that meeting and it was extremely tough at first, but I was prepared. I had my numbers. And by the end of that meeting, he offered me a job. So you never really know in what circumstances things are going to flip and you're going to have to pivot.
Thank you all. This is, I think, something that started to come up in the conversation already around uncertainty, whether it's uncertainty with how the industry is changing or even professional uncertainty within your own life and career trajectory. Was there ever a time where you weren't sure what came next for you, and how do you navigate uncertainty and risk-taking in a professional setting?
Jump in. When I was ending my tenure at the U.S. Small Business Administration, even though the SBA, Small Business Administration, is giving out small business loans, my role did not require me to be finance trained. I was a lawyer by training, strong in public policy. I knew how government operated. So I went into not knowing what was next. I had 3 or 4 opportunities to move into banking, and that was really intimidating for me. You know, did I understand the language? Could I understand finances? How would I learn that? You know, fake it till you make it, all these types of sayings. I remember being in meetings early on, meet and greets, which ultimately led to, you know, formal lunches, the interview process, and just thinking to myself how much I didn't know in this industry. And I just did as much as I could to be a sponge and learn, but I didn't, you know, you can fake it so long, but you have to admit what you don't know and realize that people see something in you, and that's why you're being selected. That's why you're getting promoted. And then you just keep trying to address your weaknesses and move forward, and you just got to embrace it. And I just remember how uneasy I was, like, can I be successful? And you just work really hard, really, really hard.
I might, that, hats off to you, Seth. I think that's great advice and it's a great experience to share with folks. I mean, it's very vulnerable to start a new job. I felt that way when I first went to Pierce Atwood as a first year law associate. But I'm going to get to tell a different story, which is I mentioned that my Champion International company got purchased by another company and my job went away. And over time, the whole mill went away. But when my job went away, I got a package. I had my 4th child. She was young. And I stayed home for about 8 months. And then I needed to go back to work. And I didn't know where to start. So my husband was still at Pierce Atwood, so I couldn't go there. So I went with my strengths. And my strengths were that lobbying work that I had done in Augusta, both at Pierce Atwood in my first days and first years, and then for Champion International. Both, it was government relations in Augusta and communications in general for companies. And I sent 5 letters to 5 organizational leaders who I knew from different ways and just offered my services to them. And I set up an LLC for my corporation, and 2 of them hired me. And so then I had clients and I was back in doing what I did best. So in that vulnerable moment of trying to find what to do, I led with my strengths. And it got me back into my own practice for a number of years. And then, as I said, my largest client, then Martins Point Healthcare, hired me.
I'll share on the other side that, you know, life is this algorithm of personal and professional and everything else that the piñata that we're all trying to manage every day. And I went through I found myself as a single mom suddenly with an 8-month and a 4-year-old at the age of 33. And my career saved me. So you know, if that constant and that spark, it is something that that you want to care for and be mindful of and all those things, that is not just sort of this parallel thing on the side, but is really intertwined with your own life on both ends. So I think I'm grateful that I did not lose that vision, and it got me through probably the hardest time in my life.
Thank you all for sharing. I am going to ask the panel one more question, and then I see we already have one question in the Q&A feature. While I'm asking and the panelists are responding to my final question, if you are in the audience and you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. But to give our interns a little bit of time to think, I will go ahead and ask the panel one more question. So a lot of you have talked about finding that spark and making sure that you're pursuing work that has that spark that's filling your cup. And wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit more. How do you define meaningful work and work that fills your cup, and how has that influenced your career path?
I'll jump in real quick. So for me personally, I've always been I've always been a helper, if you will. And I don't like to see people suffering. I don't like to see people sad. So I always want to invite myself into the scenario and see if I can brighten their day. And so by way of that, working at Hannaford in retail, I had hundreds of associates and thousands of customers that I could invite myself into their life and try to brighten their day or improve something. And so as soon as I got in retail, it was instantly filling my cup because I was having all of these different interactions with different people. And I could see my positive energy was, in some cases, helping to make them positive. And so, therefore, I was happy that I was making people happy. And I think as you ladder that up, when you're leading people and you can help coach people for development and growth and watch them grow as leaders and move on to different careers, different roles, and see that professional development, that's when you start really saying like, wow, I have an impact. And for me, if I'm making a positive impact, that that is a positive for me, right? That's a big woo. And so in my current capacity, I've been in HR for 7 years. I've been working with our internship program a couple years prior to that. I have had interns that were 19 years old and now they're 26 and they're store managers for us. And I've been a part of their journey the entire way. I'm like a proud papa, and they're not my kid, right? And I think that's the for me, that's the most fulfilling thing, is to see other people's success and us all kind of celebrate it. At Hannaford, it's like a sports team, right? You're all there collectively trying to achieve a win, right? We're trying to make the customers happy. We're trying to sell groceries. It's never an I. And so if I can help collective enjoyment and engagement and positivity, that makes me ultimately happy. So that's kind of where I'm at on that one.
I think for me, I've always been motivated to transform people's lives. And I think bringing opportunity to those who maybe do not have the same equitable chances across the board is what's motivated me. So that they say there's some people that run toward the fire and some people that run away from the fire. Like I want the bad numbers. I want to know right now how many high school students are not moving on to post-secondary education. That is, those 40% is who I want to work with and provide that opportunity. So that's what motivates me, and it seems like that's the thread throughout my career.
And I think I've touched on this fair amount already today, but for me, what gives my life meaning is helping create opportunity for prosperity for Maine families, and having the way I'm approaching it is to help create jobs that Maine people want to do, and to help create the talent that's needed to fill those jobs, because Maine is a very small state. It's very easy to get involved and have impact and have influence. And we need more young people to come in and help lead the state going into the future. I think anyone who chooses to put their profession in Maine today, the world is their oyster here in the state in terms of what they can do. So the more I can do to create those opportunities, both through a job and finding the people to fill those jobs, the happier and more meaningful it is to me.
For me, it's One is the process. I get motivated with working with people and stakeholders. I love how quirky people can be and how complex things can be with personalities and systems. And when you bring that all together and when you eventually all get rolling in one direction and you will have impact. And for me, it's how could I have that type of structure with impact in Maine for a greater good? And I think that has resonated out through my career, whether I was in the legislature or whether I was even in the U.S. Small Business Administration. And then I knew even in banking, since the world I was in sustainability and corporate social responsibility is having an impact, albeit across the country, but I really wanted to hone in and have that in Maine. That's me personally. One thing I'll add, though, is that some people just want to make money. That's all they want to do is make money. And that's okay. Do it ethically, do it responsibly, try to have an impact on how you're making money. And just, it will change over time based on your needs and wants. And that's okay too. And just to be a good person, because if you're a good person, good things will come to you. And that's what I try to always keep in my mind.
Very strong messages all around. Thank you all. Well, I've seen a couple of questions come in. If you haven't had a chance to type yours in, we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So I'm just going to go down the line in the order that we've received them. I will read the question out loud, and then anyone on the panel that feels inclined to respond, feel free to do so. So the first question that came through is from Brooklyn. She is currently a communications intern with the Maine DOE in Augusta, and her internship is wrapping up in a couple of weeks. Since there isn't a first-time opportunity there right now, she's wondering what kinds of PR or marketing roles should she be looking for in the Augusta area, and what should she be applying for in that type of industry. She says a lot of platforms like LinkedIn and Indeed don't lead to responses, and she'd love advice on how to find real opportunities and make strong connections.
Well, hi, Brooklyn. I would recommend, and happy to connect you. My email is andrea@focusmaine.org. Nancy Marshall runs Marshall Communications. It's based in Augusta. And if she doesn't have an opening, she certainly knows that world and is a totally lovely woman. And she could probably help you with what you're looking for. She'd have ideas.
I see somebody putting some notes in the chat too. That's fantastic. If anybody else has any other leads or ideas for Brooklyn, please feel free to enter them into that chat. Yeah, Brooklyn, encourage you to connect afterwards. I will move on to Chloe's question. Chloe asks, how do you balance multiple hats within your roles or multiple jobs simultaneously? Any strategies for separating work and personal life hats? So yeah, it's a great question.
Couldn't separate them. I had to merge them. My to-do list includes what I have to do for my home, for my family, for my work. And I just work it into the day. I mean, raising 4 kids, the schedules were different. Many pre-COVID, I actually have an office in my house. And in the end, there's only 24 hours a day, and you have to share them between yourself and those who are relying on you. And you compartmentalize in terms of when you're sitting down to do something, you focus on that one thing. That's what you're there to do, whether it be with your kid at the parent-teacher conference or with your boss to put the next strategic plan together. But it's all one life. And I think it works best to acknowledge that and plan the day accordingly. But it took me a while to figure that out.
I think work
I would.
life.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
No. I was just say I think work-life balance has a completely new meaning post-COVID, and so I recall pre-COVID, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, you're in the office, and some roles you wouldn't take your laptop home and you would just disconnect. Other roles you might have to have it on you in case, but you never worked remote. Now, with the opportunity to work from wherever, I also think that gives people, if they have that self-discipline, the agency to really balance it. And so I'll go on vacation, but when I have downtime at the airport and everyone hates the downtime at the airport, I check my email. I get caught up on those things so I don't feel like I'm out of the loop. So to Andrea's point, I do think of it as being one life, and my career is part of my life, and my work is part of my life. But I also have those other personal things. And it's a balance where if I need to go to a dentist appointment at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, I'm going to go to a dentist appointment at 2 o'clock in the Wednesday afternoon. I'm going to balance that out. And just as I factor in those personal needs, I factor in those work needs and find a happy medium. I think we're all going to speak to this coming from most likely a level of a salaried expectation where we have a lot more flexibility. And as young, emerging folks into careers, you want to work as much as possible, but then you get your hand slapped if you get overtime. And so it's trying to find that balance of when can you do your most meaningful work and what is that right level of effort to put in on it, right? And I think that's going to come with time and experience. But you are your best advocate, right? So you need to take care of Seth and yourself, as well as know that you have responsibilities for a business, and try to balance those the best you can.
Seth, did you want to add to that? No. I'll just tap in here. As somebody that does wear multiple hats within my role, time blocking has become my best friend. Starting getting hired into a role and having one specific project to over time, as I've shown that I'm interested in certain things, or as I've shown that I, have the capacity to work on different projects, making sure that I'm using my calendar to my best benefit so that if I have 7 tasks coming in and they're all related to different things, making sure that I'm doing all like tasks at one time so my mind doesn't ping pong back and forth and back and forth, and I'm making sure that I'm giving the time that I need to each project or each component of my role. And also balancing work and personal life. If you didn't get a chance to listen into the webinar a couple weeks ago about all things sort of mental health and well-being, go ahead and check out our MCC YouTube, because that conversation touched on how to maintain that work-life balance separation really well. So I do see one other question from Juan. Juan says he is a student at Maine Law, and one question that comes up among my peers is that wages have not kept up. How do we change this? I'm sure this is a common issue, not just within law, but sort of across the board here. And as a second part to that question, Juan is also somebody that's interested in privacy and AI, and is wondering how we can bring jobs that can be done remotely to Maine.
So the wage growth one is a challenging one. I mean, if you look at median incomes in Maine, unfortunately, we're not where we all aspire to be on a state level. And that's something, Andrea and others are, amongst all of us, are focused on. How do you continually upskill and try to strengthen the economy? I think we're also in a very unique position where there has been, as noted, in studies and so forth, significant in-migration. It allows in-migration roles allow people to live and work here, but potentially import a salary from out of state. And that's not always ideal because you want to grow Maine's economy, of course. So, obviously, I think we'd have to dive into those facts a little bit more. But, it's not always about the salary too. It's about your cost of living, your expenses, what you want to do, your financial goals. So I think, my tune has changed on that a little bit over the years. So that is really important. And then it relates to AI. I just believe that fundamentally, not only are we going to be bringing AI jobs here because they're going to come here, I think we have to go do it ourselves and implement AI jobs into our own respective workplaces, or we'll just fall behind. And frankly, that is potentially a differentiator for individuals that are seeking to become leaders and grow their income today, especially in large corporate settings. There's nothing that will often, Matt may or may not disagree, but in my opinion, if you can demonstrate leadership, lead a project, you quickly are identified as top talent. And often with that comes increased salary. And I think AI is going to be one of those areas where you see a lot of people leverage that in the near future. People with no technical background. They'll just know how to deploy the tools and they will shine.
It's all about writing a prompt. Sorry, go
I'll
ahead.
just say quickly that there's a current AI task force that we're co-chairing, the governor and the legislature, and the recommendations and findings will be in place in December of 2025. So maybe there's so much going on in that space and more to come, but that report is coming up. And I included another one on the remote worker that we commissioned on why people move to Maine as well, in case that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. I encourage people to check out the links in the chat, both the Why People Move to Maine report as well as to the Live and Work in Maine website. We have only about a minute left, so I would love to do just a really quick round robin with the panelists. And I would love if each panelist could share either what is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self who's just starting out, or what's the best career advice you've ever received and who gave it to you?
I'll jump in. Ask for what you want. So yes, be open to opportunities coming your way. But if you think there's something that you want, your boss is not a mind reader. The person you want to be your boss is not a mind reader. You need to advocate and speak for yourself in a very respectful way. It's helpful to them to hear what it is you want.
I'll say listen to your inner voice. I think those of us sometimes with an accent or part of what a racial minority and so on, sometimes it is hard for us to do what Andrea describes, but your inner voice is your guide and follow it and follow that guide. And that this career journey, there's a lot of discomfort in it, and that is also part of it.
For me, I would say looking back on it, if I was to start over again or things I wish I would have done differently is really understanding technology more. Obviously, I've mentioned AI a bunch of times, but even looking back when I first started, it would have been immensely helpful to me. And then number two, something that no one has touched on, make sure you're financially investing in yourself for your future. Retirement, leveraging 401ks, compound interest is your friend. Even if it's tiny, it will compound and you'll be in a much different position 20, 30 years later that you will allow you to do things that you wouldn't be able to do but for that consistent effort.
Sound like a banker.
I would just say, one, feedback is a gift, but take it and reflect upon it. And two, build a network and leverage your network. So I can't remember who Andrea shared her email with, but if you don't email Andrea and then you don't follow up with that other person, that's shame on you, because this is your network building and these are connections. And I wish I had leveraged and utilized that more and kept those relationships whole.
Well, thank you. Andrea, Seth, Matthew, Julia, thank you so much for being panelists for our Winding Career Paths discussion. It was a fantastic conversation. Thank you to all of the interns who tuned in to listen. If there are any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to Ava or I, and we'd be happy to continue those conversations. Again, thank you, everyone. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and we hope to see some of you at our event next Wednesday and at our webinar next Tuesday.